Fred, I wonder if you might tell us about your time as a schoolboy and going through to almost to the point where you joined the Navy.
Well, I started primary school at the age of, I suppose, 5 years of age, in my 6th year, because I was born in December of a year, and I suppose when I turned 5 the next year I would have been classified as 5, and I started my primary school at the Inglewood Primary School, which was about 4 miles out of Perth. I stayed there right throughout my primary days until I turned 13 years of age at the end of that particular year, and I started my first year of high school at the Perth Technical College when I would have been 14 years of age. And I stayed there only for 1 year because at the age of 14 in those days most boys were expected to be at work unless they were very bright at school and your parents could afford it. They would keep you at school. But I was only in a working family and I had to work. So I went to work and I worked as a messenger boy for 2 or 3 firms in Perth, and at the end of each year during that term I was fired because they had to give me an extra shilling a week or 1 and 6 a week in my wages. I think when I started off work in my first year I was on 10 and 6pence, which was the equivalent of about $1.05 today. And by the time I was 18, or when I turned 16, I was probably earning 17 and 6 a week. And in that time I was able to buy a bike for myself. And I paid that off at 2 and 6pence a week at Melbourne Star Bush Bikes. Anyway, at 16 I joined the military cadets. I was in the 11th Battalion of Military Cadets at the age of 16, and I was there for 2 years. In the last 3 months of that term I was permitted by the government to go into a full ORF camp at Melville, just out of Fremantle, and I stayed there at the conclusion of that camp, which I found very interesting and enjoyable. I put my name down to join the AIF when I left camp, and I was awaiting call-up. About a month later I met a cobber of mine who joined the Navy, and he was in uniform and he said, "Why don't you join the Navy?" So I went and enrolled at the Fremantle depot, HMAS Lewin, and I was called up within 1 or 2 days. So I joined the Navy actually in February 1941, and I served at Lewin for about 5 weeks, during which time, apart from a little bit of seamanship and marching up and down from Fremantle to South Fremantle every morning, I worked out on the boatshed jetty out from Lewin, policing the Italian fishermen that used to go in and out on their fishing trips. And we had to take their names and addresses and the crew and where they were going, when they were due back, and that sort of caper. But then I was told, well, you finish your time here, you're going over to Melbourne. So with a group of chaps I went over to HMAS Cerberus in Flinders Naval Depot in Victoria, and I served there for, that was in April 1941. I think in August 1941 I finished the course. Purely seamanship and gunnery were the main activities that I was involved with. I won my cross rifles on the rifle range at that particular time, and then I went to HMAS Cutterville in Sydney, which was more or less a transit depot for sailors awaiting draft to a particular ship. I was there for about 6 weeks, I suppose, and in September I joined, I think late September, early October, I joined HMAS Perth, which was currently then in Sydney, in Garden Island, having a refit after a term in the Mediterranean. She had a 6-month stint over there.
Now, could I ask you a couple of questions now? I'll just go back to your, just got to get the idea for people that are watching this, what values were. You talked about what your pay was, but you know, can you just give us an example of what a bus or tram fare was, or the price of milk or bread?
Well, in those days, during my school days, we had our milk and our meat and our vegetables delivered to the house where we lived. You'd leave your milk can out of a night on your doorstep and the milkman would come and fill it up for you. Similarly, the butcher would come and he'd run around the back and talk to your wife and she'd give an order and he'd drag it out of his truck and bring it back. Similarly with the baker, it was the same. So you only went to the shop if Mum ran out of something. And in those days, if you wanted to buy a bottle of milk, it would probably cost you threepence, I suppose, for a bottle of milk, or sixpence, depending on the size. Similarly, bread was very cheap, threepence or sixpence a loaf, depending on the size you got. And meat, you could go to a butcher's shop and order meat specially. And I suppose from memory in those days you could get a roast of lamb, or a leg of lamb, probably for 2 and 6, 3 shillings, 25 cents or something. And so things were very, very cheap and plentiful then if you had the money. It was just after the Depression and more or less finished by this time. And whilst my father worked during all the Depression years, he worked at Bones Limited as a departmental manager in Bones. So he was in employment all through the Depression years, which was good for our family. When I was in the cadets, I was issued with a uniform which I could take home. I was issued with a rifle which I could take home. And to a boy of 16, that was something really to do. And we even got paid a shilling every night we attended parade, and they'd even pay us our tram fare there and back, which was threepence each way by tram. And if you could have the energy and you walked, you still got your threepence. But so they were the days in those days when things were comparatively cheap compared with today, and life was far more simpler, really. When I joined the Navy, when I was working, I started off at 10 and sixpence a week. By the age of 16, I was up to 15 shillings or 17 and 6 a week. And when I joined when I went into military camp, I was on 17 and 6 a week then, at the age of 17 and a half. I stayed there till I was 18, and when I joined the Navy in February, after turning 18 in December, I started in the Navy on 5 and sixpence, I think it was, a day, or 6 and 6, 5 and sixpence a day, which was a sixpence more a day than what the Army private was getting. He was on 5 shillings a day. So the Navy paid you sixpence more. However, I went to Flinders Naval Depot in Victoria to complete my training with a group of other West Australians from Lewin, and I did my training from April to August in Flinders Naval Depot, HMAS Cerberus, and after completion of training I was drafted to HMAS Cullable, which was an old Sydney ferry in Sydney Harbour, which was really only a transit depot for cadets or for new entries waiting for a draft to a ship. In due course I was drafted to HMAS Perth, which had just returned from the Mediterranean and was undergoing a refit in Sydney Harbour, in Garden Island.
And was it badly damaged when it came back from the Mediterranean?
It had been hit by a direct bomb from a Stuka dive bomber, which had killed about, it was after the evacuation of Crete. We had a lot of Swatties on, some Army blokes on board. Killed about eight Army blokes and about 5 of naval crew off the Perth. The bomb went down just a little bit forward of the forward funnel down into the cookhouse and around that area. And I think we lost 5 sailors in that accident, so it was damaged. But she'd done 6 months in the Mediterranean and she had over 750 air raids during that time, individual air raids.